So friends, last weekend and the first part of this week was dominated, at least in my mind, by the United Methodist's General Conference in St. Louis, Missouri. Or at least it dominated the attention of those of us who were really interested in the sort of denominational machinations of churches. The United Methodists sent their worldwide cohort of 800 or so delegates to decide on an issue that has beguiled and stressed them over the last 30 years in most of the mainline and progressive churches: the place of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and clergy in the church. The United Methodist Church's Book of Discipline, which I love the title of that, the Book of Discipline, lays out the social principles of the church, which forbids things like drinking or gambling or the practice of homosexuality. LGBTQ folks are named as people of sacred worth, and that is a good thing. But the actual doing of homosexuality, so to speak, is forbidden, and is one of the reasons why those seeking ordination can be barred from being approved to serve as clergy persons. Now that is the official position of the church, but various more liberal conferences, like the one that covers Chicago, they have basically ignored this official prohibition. They have ordained gay and lesbian clergy and transgender clergy. They've done it with a kind of wink and a nod and sort of a very, very liberal interpretation of the word practice. Of course, if charges are filed by a layperson or another clergy person against that person for their sexual practice, they can be defrocked in a church trial. And yes, some churches still do church trials. But in more liberal conferences, that is pretty rare and perhaps almost unheard of. Clergy are forbidden also to perform same-gender weddings or even same-sex unions, which I've done for a couple weddings for members of the Methodist churches as a favor to, I think, sometimes the not-so-courageous pastors that have asked me to do it for their members. And I do get my sort of self-righteous tone here. I'll own that, okay? But at some point you have to do the right thing by the people you pastor. And you may pay the cost for doing the right thing, but no pension, no guaranteed job or appointment, nothing is worth not following your own conscience and doing the just and inclusive thing. Pawning off your ministry towards your church members, to me, in order to protect yourself, it's not a good look, folks. But I helped those clergy folks out because indeed they were friends, but also because the couples involved wanted a religious marriage ceremony done by a clergy person, and they deserved to have one, and so I did. Now, all of this drama has come to a head last week in St. Louis with a proposal before the delegates that was called the One Church Plan. It had been studied for a couple of years, lots of committees, a lot of work had been put into it, and it was a plan that was endorsed by the majority of the Methodist bishops. This plan will allow various parts of the church to make their own decisions around the calling of LGBTQ plus clergy. They could do whatever they want. They could discern their own positions on the immorality or morality of homosexuality. Now, the more conservative American parts of the Methodist Church, along with even more conservative international parts of the church, they could enforce their own particular rules around this issue, their own sense of what God has called them to do, while allowing the more progressive parts of the church to allow them to follow the Spirit and perhaps also openly ordain LGBTQ plus clergy. But it was not to be, because of a very large coalition of conservative international delegates and a small band of conservative American delegates. They eventually defeated the One Church Plan and brought forth their own plan, which was called the Traditional Plan. Now, the Traditional Plan was passed with the help, again, of those conservative parts of this country, or conservative Methodists of this country, a small part of those, and then with a large bulk of the international delegates. And the conservative plan defined really clearly the definition of practicing homosexual to make it harder, much harder, for LGBTQ plus people to get through a legal loophole of trying to define the word practicing. In addition, it created a mandate that any United Methodist clergy person would be automatically suspended without pay for 1 year for conducting a same-gender wedding service. And then they would be permanently defrocked if they ever did the second one. In the United States, many United Methodist churches are actually pretty progressive on a lot of issues, including this issue. But because of the international nature of the church, they will likely never be able to do and become what we in the United Church of Christ as well as the Presbyterian Church USA and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America have become. We have become, finally, mostly welcoming of LGBTQ plus folks in all parts of our church, including the ordination of openly LGBTQ plus clergy. That's a lot of things to say in a row. As a product of a very good United Methodist seminary myself, I went to Emory at Candler School of Theology many years ago, and who has many, many United Methodist clergy friends, perhaps too many, I often say. I was deeply grieved by all this, and it touched me personally because of my own struggle to be ordained with integrity, with wholeness, without lying to people or getting up here and pretending to be something I was not. That struggle of 25 years ago in the Presbyterian Church USA, when they were not as open as they are now. There was so much pain in the air in that conference that you could almost feel it through the internet streaming video. It just seemed, it was palpable. During the debate, a young gay seminarian named Jeffrey Warren spoke passionately to the conference, expressing his hurt and warning when talking about the traditional plan, that the church, was about to lose a whole generation under 40 that simply would not tolerate a church that would welcome their gay friends, their lesbian sister, their same-sex parents. In this picture, the picture on the front of your bulletin today, you actually see the Bishop Tracy Smith Malone holding Jeffrey's face in her hands after the passing of the traditional plan, trying to comfort him, perhaps reminding him that he is loved by God, loved by her, and supported by so many others, despite the fact that he will likely, at least not anytime soon, be able to serve as a clergy person openly in the United Methodist Church as it is now constituted, because of the rejection of the one church plan in favor of the traditional plan. Now, the horror of it, I never had to witness this, but the horror of it is to witness that moment and to know what it means with your own eyes, to see it being played out before you. You can't see it in the black and white picture there on your bulletin, but in the color version of this picture, you can see the redness around his eyes, likely coming from the tears he's just shed at what he's just witnessed. So friends, I want to invite us to consider that such a moment, reflected in that powerful picture, such light in a place filled with those, at least filled with darkness, for those of us who are on the other side of the issues of the winners, at least for the losers of this fight for justice, that such a moment was a moment of transfiguration. That picture, that moment was like the moment when God scrubbed off the human veneer of the Christ on that high and holy mountain and showed us the fullness of who Jesus was. That light within him that was white like lightning. Matthew, Mark, and of course Luke share the story of Jesus shining forth on that mountain, accompanied by his disciples, and welcomed there by Elijah and Moses, the latter whose face, Moses, whose face went shone in this brightness hundreds and hundreds of years earlier. This trio of talk of Jesus' departure, his death, they talk, I suppose, of his ascension as well. And the disciples sort of are basking in this heavenly splendor, and they offer to build a shrine. In some translations it says a home, like they were building a home. They didn't want to leave the mountain. Build some sort of permanency to hold on to this amazing moment. Now God, in a few seconds after the text we just read, they will actually be heard. God will speak in a cloud, right? Affirming that Jesus is indeed God's own child, and the disciples should listen to this Jesus. Later, the scene of light and splendor, it will disappear, and they will make their way down that mountain towards Jerusalem. Not quite understanding that despite the joy they will surely know along the way on that journey, the way forward, the path forward is leading towards Jesus' own death, his cruel and unfair crucifixion. And that these disciples will be shattered by it all. They will deny him almost immediately. At least for a while, they will not know what to do with themselves because of what has happened. The disciples, and maybe even Jesus, they needed this moment of transfiguration, this reminder that there is light in this world, that underneath everything there is light like white lightning. A truth they would need to recall in the coming days and even years as they followed the way of Jesus their whole lives until their own deaths as martyrs, tradition tells us. To witness to witness Bishop Malone hold Jeffrey's face so tenderly, so gently. It is a transfiguration. It is a moment when the light shines so powerfully and so unexpectedly, a moment that will need to be recalled in the many dark and difficult times ahead for Jeffrey and so many others in the United Methodist Church. Like with the disciples, a moment like this will be something Jeffrey will need to remember when the darkness comes crashing down upon him and the people who love like him. We get the transfigurations we need, we need, in order to survive moments when there is no light, when the dark is so deep it feels as if we were in the deepest part of the sea and below where there's no light can possibly make its way through the thickness of the water above us. Moments of light, moments of tenderness, moments of kindness, moments of joy, where we witness between ourselves or we witness between strangers and ourselves, even our own enemies, moments there. Those moments are gifts from God, moments given to us before we head out to our own Jerusalems, times before we yet know of our own eventual resurrection. Simply put, underneath it all, there's light, there's the light of God's goodness beneath everything. Now, to be clear, however, transfiguration is not transformation. It is not transformation. The gifts of moments when we witness the light pouring out or into a person, a place, a crowd, a simple flash of divinity given to us just when we need it, and a memory we can call forth when seemingly there is no light. That is transfiguration. A moment that reveals the world as it really is. As the disciples saw Jesus for who he was on that high and holy mountain. Transformation, however, is not just a moment or moments in time, but something longer, something more difficult, and yet, in a way, over the long haul, more joyous. When we come into our spiritual own, right? When we decide to do the work of Jesus and the work of justice in Jesus' name, that work, that journey is a lifelong one. Salvation, or wholeness, as the Greek word is probably better translated. Wholeness, salvation, doesn't happen in one moment. And rarely in moments like the ones we just read about in Luke's gospel here. No, it happens in the day and the day out choices we make to turn around our lives and go in the right directions, to choose that long obedience in the same direction, as Eugene Peterson puts it. And it is a choice to help out the world and us turn around that world and get it going in the right direction. As I said in a sermon a couple of weeks ago, nothing is harder to change than the human heart, or the soul, if you want to get spiritual about interpreting that which is within us that is holy and eternal. Our wholeness takes as long as it takes, right? It takes a while. Transformation takes a while and likely continues into eternity. And this path into eternity, into the life beyond this life, also happens in the world that we are co-creating with God, if we are to believe the last two chapters of the book of Revelation, where there is not something new, but a new heaven and a new earth, a transformation of the world as it is, a truly transformed earth, one of compassion and justice and love, and God will complete and renew that world at the end of all things. We should continue, of course, to still on this side of eternity, to do that work, to do the work of compassion and love and justice, as the old Shaker song, Simple Gift says, till by turning, we come round right. Soul work is hard work. Justice work is hard work. And the victories in our lives and the work of justice, they do not come as often as we want. But the whole of those victories and even some of the defeats we have both personally and in the work of justice, they do their work of transformation, of setting our souls and the world in the right direction. It does that work over the long haul, slowly, but always relentlessly. There's so much I want to say to Jeffrey Bourne, that young Methodist whose pleas for inclusion and justice were ultimately rejected by the majority of the United Methodist Church and their delegates on Tuesday. I probably would not say what I'm about to say anytime soon, because I know that pain, I know that hurt, that want to cling on to what you hope will one day be transformed. But if I were to chance upon it in 2 or 3 years of the journey, I would speak about the difficult choices we all have to make about whether or not our presence in any community that officially rejects LGBTQ plus people, whether our presence in those communities is ultimately an act of complicity if one stays any longer. Those are hard words, ones that I had to deal with myself 25 years ago. But I would also remind him that there are other places, other denominations, other homes where God can be met. Something I think he probably already knows. He'd never denied that the United Methodist Church, I suspect, was the only church. It's the church of his heart, and I get that. He might find himself in the midst of the journey in a new home, maybe just as beautiful as the place that he had to leave brokenhearted. You know, God finds a way when there is no way. God finds a way when there is no way, and I am living proof of that. I am living proof of that. The fact that I'm here with you 25 years ago, I could not have imagined this moment. Just simple preaching to you in this moment. But I do know, Jeffrey, whether or not you stay or leave, you will find moments of transfiguration all the time. When God just shows herself to you so fully that you will be stunned by the glory of the one who is before you. My friend Mark gave me one of those transfiguration moments this past week. Mark is a gay clergy person in the United Methodist Church. I know him from Michigan from many years ago. He was a man who was married. He came out much later in life because he could not handle that truth when he was younger. He had a wonderful wife, a good son. Marriage ended well, thankfully, but he has chosen, because of his initial vows, to remain celibate and to follow the rules put before him in that notorious book of discipline. Mark gave an interview to a local TV station about that recent decision made at General Conference. He has been open about the fact that he's a celibate gay man, and he does so to honor the words that he spoke many years ago. I deeply respect that. Here is the Facebook post that he made after seeing himself during his TV interview the night before. I was privileged to be interviewed by Wood TV yesterday. It was aired last night, Wednesday, February 27th. I watched it and was horrified by what I saw myself say. I spoke out of fear when I said that I would not perform same-gender wedding ceremonies. I abandon that fear. I repent of that stance. I will perform same-gender wedding ceremonies. Who am I to deny the unconditional love of God that can flow through me, God's called conduit of grace, justice, peace, and love? If you knew Mark like I did, I just simply cried. God just showed up. So powerful. Mark's personal struggle and his commitment to his integrity and to honoring the vows he made many, many decades earlier, that is something to be honored. But on the other hand, there's the work of justice. And here he is, putting his career, perhaps some of his pension, his health insurance on the line when he's only a few years from retirement. Our transformation can take a very, very long time, but it does come. It always comes. And again, I want to turn you back to that picture in your bulletin this morning. I want you to look at it again. I want you to look at Bishop Malone with her hands holding Jeffrey's face. And I want you to imagine the bishop being the very presence of God. The one who is nothing but love, nothing but goodness, nothing but compassion. Telling Jeffrey tenderly, I love you. I love you. You are my beloved. I will never let you go. You are my child. Do not give up hope. The transfigurations in our lives and in the greater world, they are glimpses of God shining forth. Reminders to us of this God who is light and most importantly, love. That underneath everything, good and bad, even joy and heartbreak, there is God, who is draped in light, in goodness and love itself. A reminder that, as the writer of the Gospel of John says in his first chapter, that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not and would not and will not extinguish the light. Amen. Friends, join me in prayer. Living God, we pray for Jeffrey, and we pray for all those in the midst of hurt and pain. We pray for those who voted for the traditional plan as well. We thank you for being faithful to all the United Methodist Church, but especially to those who will now suffer more deeply because of choices made by others. Bless their journey. Bless our journey. Help us see moments of you in this life, that underneath it all our joy, our pain, our struggles, you are there, and that you will not ever let us go. In Christ's name we pray.